So today we're going to wrap up this conversation we've been having over the last month or so, and the gist of that conversation has been this. What if we no longer thought of Thanksgiving as the kickoff to the Christmas season, and instead began thinking of Christmas as the culmination of the Thanksgiving season? What if we made Christmas about something entirely different than it's maybe been for our entire lives, and in the end come back to the heart of what it was about in the first place? And I want to do that by starting with a phrase that you've probably heard a million times, maybe used 1,000,001 times. It goes like this: it's all in your approach. You've heard that before, right? Your dad maybe said this to you. Your teacher maybe said this to you. You've maybe said it to your kids. It has to do with the idea of what you get out of something is ultimately tied to what you bring to it. It's how we come at people or events or things and challenges in our lives. There's this correlation between your approach and your outcome. You could think of it as going something like this. Your approach is what you get from something, and it depends on how you come at that thing. So you have option A in approach, and you have option B in approach. And what we have come to assume in our lives is that if you take option A, outcome will be outcome A. Option B will be outcome B, right? How we come at something changes everything. And I think we don't think about this reality or this truth enough in our lives, all the different pockets of our lives, but especially in our spiritual walk. I think we spend an awful lot of time on the get from part when it comes to God. What can we get from Him? And very little time on the what can we come at Him with, or how can we come at Him? We think of God as a giver, as a grantor, as a make my life better kind of being, maybe genie in the bottle kinds of thinking. And so what happens is we come to God with the magic word. You remember the magic word, right? It goes like this: please. You knew that, right? That this is the magic word? Your kids know that. And so what do? Our kids come to us and they say, can I have a snack? And you say what? What's the magic word? And they say, please. Now, when we start to think of God as the giver, the grantor, the making our dreams come true kind of God, and that we just want Him to make our lives better, what we do is we make our approach all about please. Please, God, help me with this final. Please, God, help me with this raise. Please, God, help me with my marriage. Please, God, help me with my neighbor. Please, God, please, God, please, God. And what I've come to discover is that is the wrong approach. That we've actually been coming at God backwards. At least what feels backwards to us. Because I think our approach to God should not be please, but it should be thank you. That we should start at the end, right? Because in our world, you say please first and thank you second. But I believe in God's economy, in our relationship with Him, in our approach to Him, we should start at the end. We should start with thank you. And that gets really difficult sometimes to do because we're not naturally grateful. So what I want to do is look at a psalm, which is a poem or a song that was written that kind of lays this out for us and in the end gives us some instruction on how we are to approach God. The first one I want to look at is Psalm 100 and start in verse 4. You've probably heard this a dozen times, but pay attention to what it says. It says, enter His gates with thanksgiving. Go into His courts with praise. Give thanks to Him and praise His name. Now, again, these are maybe the instructions for how we're to approach God, how we're to come at Him. And it's maybe more of an internal thing than an external thing. We're not talking about some ritual. We're not getting into the magic words kind of talk. We're talking about a stance or a position of our heart. But what's perplexing about this is that the writer says you're supposed to approach God with thanksgiving. With, as in already have it. Now, my whole life, I thought I go to God to get things to be thankful for. right? This is the relationship. I go to God, I pray, I find peace, I get blessed, fill in the blank, and then I feel thankful. I get my gratitude from God. But here we see, no. You're supposed to come into the picture with thanksgiving, as in you already have it. Not you're going to get it, you already have it. Now, this is difficult because we understand to bring something with you, you have to already have it on you. Right? I can't bring thanksgiving into a relationship with God unless I've already got thanksgiving on me. Here's how this works in our day and age. I don't know how many times it's happened for you already, but for me, several times, where someone hands me a gift for Christmas. And do you know what our response usually is? Oh, I forgot mine for you at home. Now, you and I know that's a big cover-up for I didn't get you anything. And by the way, if I say that to you, I really mean I left it at home. But in that moment, we understand I don't have a gift, so I can't bring it with me into this interaction. It doesn't exist. Now, you're going to give me one, so now I have one. And that's often how we think of God. But what we see here is no, you're supposed to bring something with you, which means you have to have it on you. You have to already be thankful. Don't worry, it gets increasingly more difficult as we go. That's verse 4. Jump back to the top of this psalm, because this verse 4 is where we're going to end up, but let's go back to the beginning. It says, shout with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him singing with joy. Did you catch it? You're not just supposed to enter into the courts of God, into his presence, into a relationship with him already with thanksgiving. You're supposed to already come to with joy, with gladness, and with more joy. You're supposed to already have it with you. You bring it into the interaction. Now, if you read that like I read that, I go, wow, God, this is really hard. Because I thought you were the one that was going to give me joy. I thought you were the one that was going to make me glad. I thought you were the one that was going to give me something to be thankful for. But now you say I'm supposed to already have it with me and bring it into the context of our relationship? Where am I supposed to get that? A better question might be, how? How am I supposed to do that, God? And the answer is so simple. God would look back at us and go, you get that from me. And we go, but wait a minute, I thought I can't get it from you. I'm supposed to bring it with you. So how now do I get it from you? And God says, just listen. And this is what the psalm goes on to say. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Now here's what's cooked into these few sentences. Not that God is going to give us something to be thankful, but that God is someone to be thankful for. We started at this last week. But what we're going to see here is that the very nature and character of God can't help but drum up gratitude and joy and gladness in us when we fully soak ourselves in the awesome majesty that is God. Now, here's how these sentences lay it out. It starts with this idea of acknowledge that the Lord is God. In other words, acknowledge that God is God and you aren't. Acknowledge that God is God, and the people in your life that you continue to look to fill that gap aren't God. Acknowledge that God is God, and your bank account, future retirement, big raise at work, cool car, big house, they aren't God either. God is God. Acknowledge that. And sometimes we need to just say it out loud. Because we get lost. We get lost in our lives and easily slip into, maybe I'm a little bit God. Maybe I'm a little bit in charge. Maybe I'm a little bit the one that directs my steps. So what we need to do is slow down long enough to say, no, God, you're God. And then the next step that's laid out for us is that we appreciate him as creator. we spend a few minutes marveling at how God put all of this all together, which is pretty complex. Have you ever read a science book? It's amazing. The idea that God could think up how your body does what it does without you ever thinking of it, full stop. Like, I got nothing left. What does it look like for us to stop for a few minutes in the next day or week or year and just go, wow, look at all that you made, God, and the variety with which you made it. We acknowledge that he's God. We appreciate that he, as God, made all of this. And then thirdly, we accept that he's the authority. If you create something, you are by default the boss of that thing. This is how it works with Legos in my home. If you put the Lego thing together, then you by default are the boss of that thing because you made it. And so sometimes what we need to do in order to get to a place of thanksgiving and gratitude and joy is accept that he's the authority. And that might seem backwards because we as humans are like, no, I want to be the authority and that would give me joy. There's a lot of freedom in not being in charge. So accept his authority. And then finally, agree that you're the sheep and he's the shepherd. That's what the psalmist said. Recognize that left unto yourself, I'll put it this way so you don't feel offended. Left up to myself, I would walk right off a cliff and not know I was doing it. This is the nature of being a human, right? We are sheep. And I am in desperate need of a shepherd to go, that would be an unwise move. I got something better for you this way. And just agree that he knows better than I do, and he can get me where is best for me and exactly where he wants me to be. And so this is what happens. We sit long enough to do all this, and all of a sudden you're going to have something well up inside of you that you didn't have before, and God didn't necessarily give you in a gift box. You will start to experience gratitude for who God is, joy in that he is yours and you are his. It's not unlike when you go to an art museum. This isn't something that I typically sign up to do, but I happen to be married to a very intelligent and smart person that every once in a while makes sure that I'm somewhat cultured. And so there have been occasions where we've gone to an art gallery, or we've gone to a museum, and I'll just be transparent with you. I spend more time watching the people watch the paintings than watching the paintings myself. I'm just fascinated by people. And here's what I can't get over, is that someone will stand in front of a painting like this and stare at it for a very long time. And if I could just go invisible, I'd want to go up and look at their face looking at the picture and try to figure out exactly what they're seeing. And sometimes if you're watching, people will cry, people will laugh, people are emotionally stirred by soaking in this work of art. And then after they walk away, if you were to get them on the side and go, can you tell me about what you just saw, what you just experienced, they would go on and on about the joy that they had, or the gratitude that they have, or all of these things that came from just marveling at something. They can't touch it. They can't take it home. They just stare at it. Because there's a fundamental principle at play. And it's this: observance of results in exuberance over. The longer you just stare at a thing, somehow, some way, the more you begin to appreciate it, the more excited about it you get. If you have a son, daughter, granddaughter, grandson, niece, nephew, or neighbor kid that's learning a musical instrument, you know what that's like. I'm spoiled. I have kids that are into music a great deal in our home, and so there is always music. And I'm learning to sit and listen to it. And as I listen to it and I marvel at their talent, I get excited about it and I start telling other people about it, and I smile more when it starts again. And what if you and I are invited into a relationship with God where all we need to do is sit and listen to the music. Sit and stare at who God is. And in so doing, we have thanksgiving and joy on us so we can bring it with us into His presence. Thanksgiving is all about presence. It's all about being with God long enough to understand God some. And when we understand God some, we appreciate Him a ton. We're thankful a ton. We're joyful a ton. That's how we get to this place where we bring it with us. That's why the psalmist, in their infinite wisdom, put the first 3 verses as the first 3 verses, and then we get to verse 4 where we started, enter His gates. You could almost say, so, that being said, enter His gates with thanksgiving. Go into His courts with praise. Give thanks to Him and praise His name. What if every Sunday, when you woke up in the morning, instead of just getting right to the coffee and right to the getting dressed and right to the car to get to church on time, you took a few minutes to just stare at the face of God and think about who He is. Think about what He's done. Think about how He's taken care of you. And then you enter into an experience with Him full of thanksgiving and joy and gladness. Now, here's what's so cool about the time of season that we're at, is that what we learn from Christmas is that this whole dynamic, this whole equation, this starting with thank you and bringing it into our relationship with God is infinitely more easy for you and for me than it was for the person who wrote this poem. And here's how I know that, because on Christmas, or just before Christmas, well, probably about 9 months before Christmas, an angel showed up to talk to Jesus' earthly dad, Joseph. And this is what the angel said. This is why it's easier for us to get this and do this than it was for the one who wrote this poem. This is what the angel said. They will call Him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Christmas was God coming to be with us. God with skin on. And so for you and I, when we think about entering God's courts, entering into His presence with thanksgiving, what makes it so simple for us is that we bring Jesus, who is God Himself already, with us. He came to us. This changes everything for you and for me. When we want to acknowledge God as God, appreciate God as Creator, agree with His direction and accept His authority, we have Jesus to know exactly what that looks like. To know exactly what that relationship is all about. We bring Him with us. See, when we read the part about entering into His courts and all of that stuff, you probably assumed, like I've always assumed, that what the psalmist is talking about is going to church. Because in our humanity, we have bought into the idea that God is here and not there. And so we wait all week to get back to God, and we show up here so we can get a little Jesus in our week. We get charged up and we have a better perspective on life, and we go back out there. But the message of Christmas is, no, you don't have to come to Him. He came to you. He brought you Thanksgiving. Ultimately, He changed it all. You and I have no shortage of things to be thankful for, joyful about, and glad in. Because Thanksgiving is all about presence. The way we approach God is with thanksgiving. The way we're in relationship with Him is with thanksgiving. And God sealed that as doable in Jesus, because Jesus is with us. And that ultimately is the glory of God. If you go all the way back, and I know this is really difficult for me to do, December 2nd was the first Sunday that we gathered together and started in this little discussion. And you remember what we said? We said that we glorify God by thanking God. And then last week we talked about that we should thank God more for who he is than what he does. And getting there, we looked at this other psalm that had one phrase over and over and over again. I hope that it's haunted you all week. And what's amazing is that in this psalm, it comes back to that same idea again. Verse 5. For the Lord is good. His unfailing love continues forever, and his faithfulness continues to each generation. You and I get to live in a time where we know what this unfailing love is all about. He loves us so much, you matter so much to him that he sent Jesus for you so that you could be in a relationship, a right relationship with God, full of gratitude and full of joy. And his love is so unfailing that even when they put Jesus on a Roman cross and killed him, the game was not over. And 3 days later, he walked out of the tomb. It's unfailing love. And in that unfailing love is what makes it possible for you and I to have this gratitude-filled life and relationship with God. So for me, in the end, Jesus isn't just the great gift giver, which is what we think of Christmas as. He's also the great gift enabler. Not only is he a gift himself, but he makes it possible for us to live a Psalm 100 life because he's with us. We don't have to dig, we don't have to build, we don't have to fabricate, we don't have to put pieces together. We can just go to Jesus. Look at Jesus and see all of the greatness of God. And here's what's in this psalm that we kind of glance by, but we shouldn't. That truth, that unfailing love, that level of gratitude and joy is on us, not just to bring to God, but also to bring to each generation. Our kids and grandkids, your neighbor kids and their kids. His unfailing love continues on forever into the next generation. So how do we go about actually doing what God put us here to do? How do we carry Thanksgiving not just into our presence, into the presence of God, but also into the next generation with us? What's interesting about this psalm is that it's one of a variety of types of psalms that you will find in that collection of poems and songs. This one in particular is what's called an homage psalm, or if you're really fancy, homage. But an homage is really simple. It's all about special honor and respect given publicly. That's what this is. So what the psalmist is doing in these 5 verses is showing special honor and respect so that everyone can hear it. And what does that honor and respect look like? Acknowledging who God is, appreciating his creation, accepting his authority, and agreeing with his direction. And in that, we give thanks and live a joy-filled life. This is what the psalmist wants all generations to remember. And so what would it look like for us to do the same? To make sure that we don't forget who God is and how great he is and how he's done so much for us, even in this year, practically speaking. So here's my idea. Hopefully you brought your 21-day gratitude challenge Post-its with you back to church today. If you didn't, don't worry, no one's going to give you a bad grade. We have another option for you. But if you did, you have an envelope on your chair, and I'd love for you to pull out that envelope. It says Thanksmas on it. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to put your sticky notes inside that envelope and seal the envelope and then put your name on it. Now, if you didn't bring your sticky notes, still pick up that envelope, pretend like you're putting sticky notes in it, and then write on the inside of the envelope a few things that you don't want to forget that you're grateful for this year, okay? Really simple. If you don't got it, no worries, you're still going to participate. 2, 3, 4 things I don't want to forget how grateful I am today for this thing that happened this year, this week, this month. And here's what we're going to do. In a minute, I'm going to ask the ushers to come up the aisles, and I'm going to ask you to pass your sealed envelope down this way. So to my left, to your right. And we're going to collect those for you because your house is probably like my house. And in a few hours, things are going to start flying everywhere. Things that would knock sticky notes off the wall. And eventually the glue will run off of the sticky note and it will fall. And I know what you'll do with it. You'll put it in the trash. I know that because it's what I would do. So here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to collect all of those for you and hold on to them. And then in 2019, we're going to give ourselves the gift of gratitude. And so about 5 weeks before Christmas of 2019, we're going to pull out this big box of gratitude. And we're going to lay all those envelopes back out for you with your name on it, and you're going to pick it up. And in a year from now, you get to reflect on all that God has done for you. You get to kick off the Thanksgiving season by reflecting back on this. And you can sit down with your kids who are now a year older, or your grandkids, or nieces, nephews, neighbor kids, and say, look at what God did last year. And look at what he's done since then. How we've grown, how we've changed. And you might all of a sudden in that start to experience what the psalmist is talking about and bring joy and gladness and thanksgiving with you into that season instead of having to start over again. Because Thanksgiving is all about presence. And what this will do, I believe, at least it will for me, is allow me to sit in the presence of God for a few minutes and remember who he is and what he's done. Now, here's why it's so important to do an homage like this, why it's so important to practice things like this. Because it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget. Listen, it doesn't mean you're a bad Christian. It means you're a human being. You get busy. You have a job, you have a spouse, you have kids, you have a boyfriend, a girlfriend, you have friends, and you have challenges that pop up out of nowhere, and it is easy for us to zero in on all of those things and forget about all of this other good in our life. It's important to do things like this because next year may not be as good as this year. I know that's a real Debbie Downer kind of thought. But I think it's important for us to be sober-minded about what it means to be alive. We have no idea what next year will look like. And by the time we get to Christmas 2019, you might be feeling pretty beat up, alone, disappointed, and frustrated. You might even start to feel like, where's God? And then you'll have this gift of, oh yeah, there was God, 21 days in a row. The other thing is equally true, and this is a little better news. Next year may not be as bad as this year. It could be a lot better. And here's what happens when things get better. We forget about how bad they were. And we forget that in the hard stuff, God was still there. Right? You have an envelope full of things that maybe came in the midst of a really difficult season of your life. And next year might be awesome. You might win the lottery. You might go on a great vacation. You might find the person of your dreams, all of those things. And how great would it be in the middle of that awesome season to sit down and go, wow, God not only delivers when it's good, he delivers when it's bad. And all of a sudden, we will have thanksgiving and joy and gladness. So, you and I, we have a choice as to how we approach the next 60 hours. 59 hours and 58 seconds. It's coming. And you and I get to decide how we're going to come at it. We can come at it, we can approach it with fear and trepidation and anxiety and depression and all of those kinds of things. Like, we can come at it with that because, they're going to be there. And that can send us into a tailspin. Or we can enter into the next 60 hours with thanksgiving, joy, and gladness. Not because the next 60 hours are guaranteed to go smoothly, but because the next 60 hours are guaranteed to be filled with Jesus, because he is God with us. And this is how I know Christmas is the culmination of the Thanksgiving season. Because on December 25th, we celebrate that incredible gift. The gift that we can be the most thankful for.